The subject I want to address is, was the splitting of the sea difficult? And if it was, for whom? But before we get into that, let's have a look at the story straight from the source. So we know the Jews ran away, and after a few days, message gets back to Pharaoh. The Jews actually ran away. They asked for 3 days leave to go and serve Hashem by the mountain, in the desert. They're not coming back. And that's the point at which Pharaoh realizes that he's got to get his workforce back. They've gone with wealth from Mitzrayim, and he wants them back. So he chases after them, and they catch him up. And the Torah describes a situation where they are, by the sea, and there is a cliff on the one side. There's really no way to go. The Egyptians behind, and Pharaoh is coming nearer and nearer, and they're very scared, and they call out to Hashem. I haven't put the full story, so I'm skipping some verses here and there. And what do they say to Moshe? Why do we have to come here? Was it because there's no graves in Egypt that we have to come here to the wilderness and die? What were you thinking taking us out of Egypt? And then for the first time, this comes out that they expressed reluctance, and they'd expressed skepticism back in Mitzrayim. Didn't we tell you back there let's just be there, rather serve the Egyptians than go out into the desert? So there was already a bit of an opposition to that plan going way back, and now things are going sour and seem to be going way south. Of course, that voice comes right up, and so Moshe says to the people, "Don't fear. Stand strong and see the salvation of Hashem, which He will do for you. As you see Egypt today, you will not see them ever again. God will battle for you, and you hold your peace." And then the miracle that we know so well about, Hashem says, "Don't cry out to me. Let's just go forward. You lift your staff, and you're going to split the sea, and the Jews can march into the sea on dry ground. And then the Egyptians will follow behind them into the sea. And in fact, what happened was, come morning, Hashem is looking down from that pillar of cloud, and he throws the Egyptian army into confusion. And yes, he then tells Moshe, spread your hand out again over the sea. The sea goes back over the Egyptians, over their infantry, over their chariots, their riders, and so forth. And Moshe holds his arm over the sea, and the sea goes back to its normal state. Egyptians feeling at its approach, Hashem hurls the Egyptians into the sea, and that's where the miracle of Kriyat Yam Suf occurs. Now, was that difficult? Well, depends who you are. How do we know that splitting of the sea was a challenge? Because there are two other aspects of divine running of the world that are compared to the splitting of the sea with the adjective kashe. It is difficult. So the one here you can see in Hebrew the word kashe, difficult. Where is it here? Kashe. Zivugan shel Israel, the matching up of couples of Jewish people, Kriyat Yam Suf, like splitting of the sea. And yes, there you have the husband, there you have the wife, and they've got to meet, but there's a kind of a sea in between them. So the Talmud in Sota used this expression. It's hard like Kriyat Yam Suf to describe this. It's a story right at the beginning of the book of Sota. If we start reading from the Rabbi Baba Chana says, that Rabbi Yochanan says it's difficult to match a couple together, as was the splitting of the Red Sea. And here's a verse that describes the splitting of the sea. God makes the solitary individuals dwell in a house. Okay, Motzi Asirim Bekosharot, and then that is bringing out prisoners into prosperity. So Hashem takes single individuals and causes them to dwell in a house, right? And then matching a man and a woman. And this is compared to Exodus from Egypt, who culminated in the splitting of the Red Sea, where he released prisoners into prosperity. So the Talmud kind of draws that parallel here between splitting the sea and making a shidduch, and says they're both difficult. Here's another one. Uh, Talmud also, this was in Sota, this Talmud was in Psachim, and there the Talmud says that sustenance of a human being, muzonotav shel adam, to sustain a person, is also hard, like splitting of the sea. Here's a text. It's Rav Shezevi who says, quoting Razman Azariah, providing a person's food is as difficult as the splitting of the Red Sea, as it is written, he gives food to all flesh, for his mercy endures forever. So that's in Psalm 136, where there's 26 instances of Ki Olam Chazdo, his, where is it now? His mercy endures forever. And juxtaposition of the verses, he divided the Red Sea in sunder, for his mercy endures forever. So the reiteration of that last part kind of puts an equivalence between the two. And the Talmud therefore says both are considered difficult. So we have three things that are called difficult before God: splitting the sea, and then the sustenance given to people so they can live, and the shidduch, or the matching of chosna and kallah, the husband and wife. Now let's first go back to the splitting of the sea. And what is so difficult about it? I mean, for me, I don't know how we'll do it, but there we have Hashem. He's done greater stuff, I think. He created the world. He got us out of Egypt. Plagues, don't know, the burning bush, the flood. I mean, they so powerful manifestations of God's might. What does it mean? It's hard, kriyat yam suf. It's difficult, like splitting the sea, and that's the model that's used whenever something is difficult and challenging. Perhaps misunderstanding where the difficulty lies. Perhaps the difficulty is not with Hashem. The difficulty lies with us. Because sometimes we get stuck in a box, in a mindset, and we find it difficult to get out of it, and that makes it difficult for Hashem to make the miracles happen. So there's a lot of talk now, a year and a half later, looking back at what happened October 7th, and in Israel they talk about the conceptia, or well, I don't know if in English you can translate it as conception, but being locked in a certain concept, or we would call a certain mindset, a certain kind of paradigm, and you're locked within that. And of course, political, we're not going there now, but the political thinking is that Israel was so sure of their defenses, they were so positive that Hamas was powerless and they could never cross the border. They were so trusting in their electronic security that they couldn't imagine such a thing could happen. And sometimes you get locked in the mindset. You can't imagine that something is going to happen. So you kind of can't cross. You can't move across into out of that box, and out of that mindset. And let's analyze the mindset of the Jewish people as they stood there, which were literally a rock and a hard place. There's some cliffs on the one side, there's a sea there, and the Egyptians behind, and they've got nowhere to go. And what were they thinking? There's a famous medrash. It's so oft quoted that I was sure it's going to be in Rashi. So sometimes you think it's going to be there. You open up your Chumash, you look in Rashi, and it's not there. So I had to do a bit of digging, which fortunately, when you have online resources, makes it quite a bit easier. It's actually a medrash called Medrash Rashbi, but it's a very famous medrash. And the medrash says the following: when the Jewish people were at the sea, they divided up into 4 camps. Category 1, let's throw ourselves into the sea. This is the kind of Masada a mindset of, we don't want to perish at the hands of the Egyptians. We know what they're going to do. It's hopeless. There's nothing we can do. So let's just all run into the sea, commit mass suicide, but not go back to being slaves in Egypt. Second group says that's nonsense. Life is more important than anything else. Let's return to Egypt. Let's just give up, surrender, and they'll take us all back with the money and all. But we really don't have at least we'll have life. And we lived in Egypt, we survived. It wasn't long, it was only about 6 or 7 days, I forgot already. The years and years and years of hardship. So that's the second approach. There's a third faction that's saying, we can do this. We can rebel, we can wage war against the Egyptians. And finally, a fourth camp says, don't use your strength and don't surrender and don't try to wage war. That's kind of the Frumma, the religious faction who's saying, let's just pray and put our trust in Hashem. Let's do nothing. And it's interesting to look at these four categories, these four camps of people, because when there have been threats and challenges our nation has had to face, these are the approaches. The four camps repeat themselves over and over and over in terms of how to deal, with an enemy that's threatening us with a danger and so forth. And you've got the brave Masada approach, which has happened so many times throughout our history. We had the defeatists who say, no, let's just give up. Those who the partisans, the fighters, and of course those who say it's hopeless and only Hashem can help us. And all of these approaches are going to be rejected when Moshe tells them that's not what we're doing. And remember that verse there. When Moshe says to the people, we're not doing this. We're going to have a miracle. Hashem's going to help us. But if you look at his answer, each of the statements in these two verses actually is speaking to one of the camps. So don't fear. Stand by and witness the deliverance of Hashem. So that is speaking to that faction that's saying, we're just going to have to commit mass suicide. He says, do nothing of the sort. Stand there and watch. You're going to see redemption. To the second group that said, we're going to have to surrender. We'll have to go back to Mitzrayim. No, you're never going to see Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is going to cease to be an entity. It's not going to be there. To those, faction number 3, who argued, let's wage war, Moshe says, no, God's going to wage war. And to those who said, all we need now is prayer, Moshe says, no, at this point, that's not even what's needed. It's tacharishun. You're going to be quiet. So they're stuck. They're stuck in that mindset, in that box. And they don't know, how to get out of it. They don't know how to. And Moshe says, in order for the salvation of the sea to happen, you need to go. And so the verse we saw earlier says, speak to the children of Israel and they will travel. And the story you've probably heard many times over is that they just stood there frozen. And Moshe had his staff up, but nothing happened. It wasn't until the head of the tribe of Yehuda, remember the name of Nachshon ben Aminadav, actually walked into the sea, that the sea split. So it was necessary to walk out of those four kind of boxes, those four kind of paradigms that people had locked themselves in, and walk into the sea, not in the form of suicide, but in an act of faith that Hashem said the sea is going to split. And when they walked onward with full faith, that happened. So that was the challenge of splitting of the sea. Not that it was difficult for Hashem. It was difficult for us to make that miracle happen because we had to get out of our conceptia. We had to get out of our mindset of this is the correct approach. This is how it's going to happen. Salvation won't happen because we're going to fight or because we're going to pray. Or there cannot be a salvation, and therefore let's go back, or let's commit mass, suicide of our people. Those were the mindset they were locked in. They had to get out of them. May I suggest that when it comes to the other two things that are compared, those are also models of mindsets. Let's take a marriage. I think at some point before we got married, we knew exactly what we were looking for. We could have written out, this list of the description of the gentleman or the lady that was going to be our life partner. Except, there was this joke circulating fairly recently about the wife who writes out a wish list of the perfect man that she wants, who makes his bed in the morning and he follows rules, and he cleans the garden, and he's home whenever needed, and he's in bed early. And the shadchan wrote back and said, yes, this man exists. He's actually an inmate in Portsmouth prison. So we don't always get, the order list exactly. But sometimes we get locked in to this is the shidduch, or whether it's for ourselves or whether we're looking for, a partner for one of our children. We're locked into a paradigm from which we have to shift, and we get locked there. And that's why the shidduch is difficult. Truth is, it's predetermined. It says in the Gemara that as the soul comes into the world, it is announced above. This one will marry that one. It's a concept we called bashert. How come then the two bashert people don't always, come together? Because maybe their mindsets are different and they're locked in that mindset and they cannot get beyond it. And if we dig deeper into the meaning of this experience at the sea where it split, Kabbalah uses very interesting terms. It says there's an Alma de Idgalia, Alma de Idkasya. There is a revealed world and there is a hidden world. And the splitting of the sea is, there's a whole world below the sea. We know there's mountains and there's valleys and there's fauna and flora, and I mean it's a different world, but we're totally oblivious to it because maybe we know what happens, in the top layer of the sea. Once you get closer in depth, we don't know at all what's going on in the depths of the sea that have never been plumbed, because it's far too difficult to get to, and the pressures of the water are immense. So we know there's a world there, but we don't really know what the world's all about. We don't see it. When the sea splits open, then suddenly we have a glimpse into a hidden world. We have a glimpse into a dimension of the world that's not visible under normal circumstances. So Alma de Idgalia, from the word galui, the revealed world, is what we normally experience, but that's a world in which godliness is fairly, hidden, and where miracles aren't experienced on a regular basis. And then the sea splits, and you can see the seabed, and you can see another reality that's always been there, was just hidden from the eye. And when you're looking for a shidduch, when you're looking for matching up, finding your life partner, that's it. You're looking for the visible stuff. So you're going to look at the person's bank accounts, and you're going to look at their, physical features, and you're going to be looking at very external stuff. Why is that? Because you can't really see the soul, because that's not out there. But finding the correct life partner, the Zohar talks about two half souls coming together and two halves making one complete unit. That's what a zivug is. That's what pairing together a husband and wife is. Because we're locked into the revealed world vision, the real world approach, sometimes we don't really see people for who they are. It's not just in marriage, but in general. And what we have to do is split the sea. What we have to do is say, there may be inner core values that I have to discover, that cannot be seen on a bank statement, and cannot be seen on a photograph from Tinder or one of these dating apps. Those are deeper, more core issues that stem not from the revealed world, but from the hidden world. It's the same when a person needs sustenance from Hashem. And we give God a hard time with sustaining us because we also have preconceived notions of how we're going to get wealthy. Usually it's with minimal effort and hands staying clean. It's an easy job with defined hours. Most people want to be their own boss. They want to work for someone. And sometimes all of these are very unrealistic. Sometimes we're blessed and we're lucky, or we have parents who preceded us who were able to help us out in business. But for most of us, even under those circumstances, being sustained on a daily basis with our daily bread requires a lot of hard work, and it doesn't always fit in the picture, in the box, in the conceptia, in the mindset of what we have. And for Hashem to be able to sustain us, we got to be able to get out of that and beyond that, and realize that it might not be the way we always envisage it. It might just be something which is deeper and more difficult. So that is where the comparison, well, that's where the difficulty is with the sea, or the splitting thereof at least. And that's why we compare things that are difficult to the stilling of the sea, where one has to dig a little bit deeper. I was just yesterday speaking to, my wife about education and children, and she's involved in the high school. And sometimes what you see is not what you see is not really what's inside. And sometimes you've got to really get into the mind of a child and get to know them well before be able to educate them properly, but connecting with them. It's not always the externalities that are going to make it possible to reach into the depth of a child's mind, and more importantly, into the depth of a child's heart, a student, to be able to educate them. And that's similar to the splitting of the sea, where we have to go split open the externalities and go a little bit deeper. I digress, but only slightly. This coming Shabbos is the 75th Yotzat of Reb Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. He was a previous Lubavitch Rebbe, led the Lubavitch Chabad movement for 30 years, died in 1950, took over from his late father in 1920, 10 years of which were in the Soviet Union, 10 years of which were in Eastern Europe, and then the final 10 years in the United States. He passed away on the 10th of Tevet. The Yotzat will be on Shabbos. He passed away on the 10th of Tevet in the year 1950. That's 5710. Let me tell you what line is most famous. He arrived, as I said, in 1940, because he spent 10 years in Israel. And this is a picture of when he came off the boat in 1940. There he is. To his right is his son-in-law. His other son-in-law, who became the Rebbe subsequently, wasn't there yet at that point. There's some elder Hasidim who met him. And one of the mottos that the previous Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak, lived by was, "America is no different." Now, what do you mean America is no different? America was a world in which people were kind of on the boat throwing the yarmulke and sometimes talis and tefillin overboard, and they didn't want to know from the Yiddishkeit once they got to a new world, because they had been told that practice of Yiddishkeit is just not something that can continue in this new world. And if you literally want to pick up the gold of which with which the stones or the streets were paved, you're going to have to assimilate completely into the American melting pot. That was the dream. Therefore, Yiddishkeit didn't exactly thrive in the way that it could have. Along came the Rebbe with a new mindset. Said, America is not different. There's no reason why Yiddishkeit shouldn't thrive here, because if you look at the externalities, these are Jews who've chosen to turn their back on their roots and their origins. But if you open up the veneer of the revealed world and look into that hidden world, you're going to discover the shamas. You're going to discover souls that long for spiritual connection, that long for cleaving and clinging to Yiddishkeit and having a relationship with Hashem. And against all odds, established an educational system. In fact, established the yeshiva still in that position that you saw from the docks at the harbor, he continued to build an absolute empire, initially in the United States, and then handing over the reins to his son-in-law, who took over many of the activities when he came a few months later and joined him in the USA. He made him chairman of many of his organizations and outreach. But the Rebbe continued the leadership and kind of took it to steps beyond conquest of Africa by Chabad. I started with my grandfather, who was appointed by the Rebbe in 1950, a few days after he assumed the leadership, at least unofficially, and sent to Morocco. I mean, I don't know how many Chabad centers there are in Africa. Every time I count, there are more. And Australia and literally in the entire world, and most recently, popping up in every Far Eastern country, and made all these countries that we thought were not possible to have the growth of Yiddishkeit, with that attitude of America isn't different, and all these other countries are different. Um, Continue to build Jewish souls by seeing the soul for what it is, and by being able to, peel away the veneer of whatever would conceal. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.